I never thought the unraveling of my marriage would begin at such a well-decorated event. The irony, in hindsight, is almost cinematic. The celebration was supposed to be simple. A backyard anniversary party for Kendra's parents, honoring 35 years of marriage. A milestone that, frankly, inspired me. Not because I idolized their relationship, but because I believed in the symbolism of it. 35 years of commitment, of choosing each other over and over again, even when it wasn't easy. That meant something to me, or at least it used to. The entire setup was picturesque. Kendra had been planning this thing for weeks, maybe months. String lights hung above rows of white-clothed tables, subtle jazz playing through rented speakers, framed photos of her parents throughout the years lining a makeshift gallery near the patio. I arrived a little later than expected due to traffic on the bridge, but when I walked into the backyard, everything looked like a scene from a wedding magazine. It was elegant, warm, and full of smiling faces. And Kendra? She looked beautiful. She wore a forest green dress, simple but striking, with her hair down the way I liked it. She smiled when she saw me and gave me a quick peck on the cheek before whisking off to check on something with the caterer. That was her style. Grace under pressure, all smiles and small talk, always making sure everything was perfect. I admired that about her. I still did. The first hour went by in a blur of toasts and wine. Her dad gave a speech, full of dry jokes and genuine emotion, and her mom wiped away tears with a napkin she pretended not to need. Guests laughed, clinked glasses, and swapped stories. I found myself chatting with her cousin Devin about baseball, then with her Uncle Ray about stocks, and I kept glancing over at Kendra, feeling a low, steady pride. This was her family, her world, and by extension it was mine too. Or at least it felt like it. And then came the slideshow. Kendra gathered everyone's attention after dessert. "We put together something special for Mom and Dad," she said, holding up a little remote like a showman about to unveil the grand finale. "Just some old memories. Don't judge the fashion choices." Laughter rippled through the crowd. The projector cast a wide square of light onto the side of the house, and the first few photos were sweet and harmless. Kendra as a toddler hugging her golden retriever. Her parents on their wedding day. Vacations, birthdays, random candids over the years. There was a warm hum of conversation, people pointing and smiling, making little comments like, "Look how young your dad looked," and "I remember that trip to Lake George." And then it happened. The photo flicked onto the screen so quickly I thought I imagined it at first. A candid of Kendra, sure, but not from childhood or some family trip. No, this was recent, maybe within the last year. She was indoors, dressed in business casual, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. He wore a crisp white dress shirt, sleeves rolled slightly at the cuffs, and had his arm around her waist. Not casually, not platonically, but in asterisk mately. His hand rested just below her ribs, fingers splayed. And Kendra, she was laughing, leaning into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I just froze. I wasn't the only one. The chatter died off so suddenly it was like someone cut the sound feed. A few people gasped softly. Others turned to look at me. I could feel their eyes. Some confused, some pitying, and worse, a few almost expectant. Like they were watching the opening scene of a drama they'd been anticipating. And Kendra? She laughed. Just a little too loud, just a beat too late. "Oh, that's just a friend from work," she said, fumbling the remote. "I must have uploaded that to the wrong folder. Whoops." She flashed a tight smile and clicked ahead quickly. The screen jumped to a 4th of July barbecue from years ago, but the mood was already poisoned. Her mom, bless her, jumped in to rescue the room. "Oh, I remember this one," she chirped, pointing to the next photo. "That's when your father burned all the hot dogs because he got distracted trying to impress the neighbors." A few chuckles, forced, strained, but the damage was done. I felt like I was watching a movie in slow motion, like the walls around me had been padded with cotton. Someone nearby whispered something, and then another. My eyes were still locked on the now vanished photo. I could still see it in my head. Kendra's eyes closed in laughter, the angle of her body toward that man. The way his hand didn't just rest on her waist. It claimed it. "Just a friend from work," she said. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But I saw it. Everyone saw it. And more importantly, everyone saw me see it. I felt like a fool. The rest of the slideshow passed in a blur. I stood there, pretending to smile when people looked my way, pretending to enjoy the photos, pretending that something essential inside me hadn't just snapped. Kendra didn't look at me once after that. She kept her eyes on the screen or on her mom. She clapped when the last slide played, raised a glass to her parents, and even kissed her mom on the cheek. Performance-grade cheerfulness. But something had shifted. I knew it. I felt it in the weight behind her words. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she turned toward me. The way her hand found my back with a mechanical kind of pressure, like she knew she had to make it seem okay for show. I kept replaying that image in my mind over and over like a glitching record. Who was he? Why had I never heard of him before? Why was his hand on her like that? And why the hell was that photo even in the folder she submitted for a family event? She was usually meticulous. Careful. She didn't make accidental slip-ups. Unless it wasn't an accident. Unless she wanted me to see it. Or maybe she just stopped caring enough to hide it. When the party began to wind down and guests started making their goodbyes, I stood quietly near the dessert table, watching her out of the corner of my eye. She was laughing with her sister, sipping wine, completely unbothered. Like the photo never happened. Like I was the only one stuck in it. Her dad walked up to me and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Great slideshow," he said with a gentle smile. "Some good memories there, huh?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, definitely." But all I could think was, what about my memories? What was real? How long had she been smiling like that in someone else's arms? That night, as we drove home, I stared out the window in silence. Kendra didn't say much either. She just hummed along to the radio and asked if I'd had fun. I told her it was nice. That's all. Just nice. She didn't bring up the photo. Neither did I. But the silence between us wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. That's the thing about betrayal. Sometimes it doesn't come with a confrontation or a screaming match or a dramatic discovery. Sometimes it slips into your life like a shadow, quiet, creeping, and cold. And you don't know you're living with it until one too many eyes are looking at you with pity. That night, lying in bed next to Kendra as she scrolled through her phone like nothing had happened, I stared at the ceiling and realized something I hadn't been willing to admit before. I didn't know her anymore. Not really. And maybe I hadn't for a long time. After the anniversary party, everything looked the same on the surface. Same house. Same routines. Same woman beside me in the kitchen, cracking eggs into a bowl like she had 1,000,000 times before. But my world had shifted. I just hadn't told her yet. Something about that photo haunted me. Not just what it showed, but how easily she'd brushed it off. The way she grinned and called him just a friend from work, like I was supposed to swallow it whole. And for years, I might have. I'd been trusting to a fault, always giving her the benefit of the doubt, always assuming her intentions were good. But once suspicion plants itself in your mind, everything starts to rot. Fast. That night, I lay awake long after Kendra fell asleep, listening to the rhythmic sound of her breathing while my mind played back scenes I had ignored the first time around, moments that now screamed for attention. The first thing that came to mind was dinner. Or the lack of it. For the longest time, we had a ritual. Every night around 7, we'd sit down together, nothing fancy, just home-cooked meals and conversation. She'd tell me about annoying coworkers, I'd complain about suppliers messing up orders at work. We'd drink wine, tease each other about who cooked better, and it felt like something solid. Then, about 6 months ago, those dinners started to vanish. She began staying late. "We've got a new supervisor," she told me one night, keys jangling in her hand as she rushed past the kitchen. "Wants everyone running at 110%, you know how it is." At the time, I nodded. I understood work stress. I figured it was temporary. But temporary turned into frequent. Once a week became twice, then more. I started eating alone more often than not. Reheated leftovers, staring at the empty chair across from me. Then there was her phone. Kendra used to be careless with it. Left it on the table, sometimes forgot it in the bathroom. I used to tease her about her dozens of unread texts. But around the time the dinner stopped, she started carrying it like it was a second limb. She took it everywhere. To the bathroom, to the laundry room, even when she took the trash out. At first, I told myself it was just work emails, her job had gotten more intense after all. But when she started locking her screen the second I glanced in its direction, my gut began to tighten. I remembered one night in particular. She was doing dishes and her phone buzzed. It was face down, but I was sitting close enough to see the light. I didn't even try to read it, I just tilted my head. That's all. She noticed and snapped, "Do you mind?" I blinked. "What? Can you not hover?" she said, half laughing, but there was no humor in it. Hover? I'd been sitting in the same damn chair I always sat in. After that, I noticed how often she'd angle the screen away from me. How she'd swipe away messages before replying, like she didn't want me seeing who they were from. Once, she was in the bathroom with the faucet running for 15 minutes. I walked past and heard her laughing softly through the door. When she came out, her face changed the moment she saw me. The smile vanished. Her eyes scanned me like she was calculating something. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep it light. "Yeah. Why wouldn't it be?" she said, walking past me. Her phone never left her hand. Another time, I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and found her downstairs, sitting on the couch in the dark. Her screen lit up her face in a way that made her look almost unfamiliar. She didn't hear me at first. I stood there silently, watching as her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing fast, deleting, retyping. When she finally noticed me, she jumped. "You scared me," she said, forcing a smile. "What are you doing?" I asked, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Couldn't sleep. Just scrolling," she said, too quickly. She tucked her phone against her side like she was hiding a loaded *P***N. I nodded slowly and walked back upstairs. I didn't have the strength to press her. But it wasn't just the phone. There was more. Around the same time she got busy, she also started taking better care of herself. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved that she took pride in her appearance. I always did. But this was different. Sudden. Almost strategic. New perfume. Not the floral scent I used to find on her pillow, but something richer, more seductive. She'd put it on before leaving for work meetings, but never when we were home together. I noticed she bought new lingerie too, stuff I hadn't seen her wear, not for me anyway. Lacy, expensive. Hidden in drawers I rarely opened. She started spending more on her hair, her nails. Little things. Things that by themselves meant nothing. But all together? They built a picture I didn't want to see. She'd joke with friends on the phone about needing to blow off steam. I remember one call in particular where she laughed and said, "Well, you only live once, right?" She was in the kitchen. I was in the hallway. She didn't know I could hear her. Who was she talking to? And about what? One afternoon, I found a receipt for a boutique hotel tucked into her purse, dated on a Wednesday night. She told me she had a late meeting. I didn't confront her about it. Not then. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself all the wrong things. Maybe it was a meeting space. Maybe it was for someone else. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down I knew. I began to look back even further, rewinding memories like old VHS tapes, stopping at scenes that used to feel normal and now didn't. How she flinched once when I reached for her phone to check the time. How she got strangely defensive when I asked about her coworkers, especially the new ones. And how she once told me out of nowhere that every woman needs a secret or two. At the time, I thought she was being playful. Yeah? It felt like a confession I'd missed. She also started asking me about finances in strange ways. Casual questions like, "You'd be okay if something ever happened to the business, right? Or do we have backup savings somewhere else just in case?" I chalked it up to stress. The economy. Whatever. But now I started wondering if she was setting something up. A parallel life. A separate plan. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how blind I'd been. Not because I was stupid, but because I wanted to believe in her. I wanted to believe that the woman I married still existed underneath the shifting eyes and guarded smiles. But belief isn't proof. And every time I pieced something together, every text she deleted, every lie she told, I felt a piece of myself crumble. The trust I'd built over years, brick by brick, was turning to dust right in my hands. It's a strange kind of grief to lose someone who still sleeps next to you. But I hadn't lost her. Not yet. Not entirely. She was still here, still pretending, still lying. Which meant there was still a mask to pull off. I just didn't know how deep it went. Not yet. There's a specific kind of stillness in a house when one person is living a lie and the other is just beginning to realize it. It's not loud. It's not chaotic. It's quiet. Mechanical. Every drawer opens and closes with rehearsed rhythm. Every word spoken is wrapped in sugar and silence. We went on like that for a while. Me pretending I didn't know, and Kendra pretending I never would. But pretending has a shelf life. And mine expired the night her phone buzzed while she was in the bath. It was a Tuesday. The kind of forgettable day you'd never think would change your life. Kendra had just finished dinner, picked at it, and said she was going to relax in the tub. She brought a glass of wine and disappeared upstairs without much else. No kiss on the cheek. No conversation. I stayed at the table, staring at the food she barely touched, wondering how we drifted so far. A year ago, we used to talk until the plates were cold. Now she couldn't wait to get away. That's when I heard it, her phone buzzing. It was sitting face down on the nightstand. A rare mistake on her part. She usually kept it glued to her hand, like a hostage negotiator protecting secrets. The screen lit up, and I saw the name, Luke Redheart. Under it, a preview. You looked so perfect today. I'm still thinking about that moment in the elevator. I froze. Felt like I'd swallowed ice. My body went still, my heartbeat suddenly deafening in my ears. I didn't want to touch the phone. Part of me hoped the name would vanish, that maybe I'd misread it. But the message stayed, glowing in the dim light of our bedroom like a confession. I picked it up. My hand was shaking. Not from rage, at least not yet, but from confirmation. The passcode. She'd changed it months ago. I knew the old one, my birthday. The new one? I hadn't tried. But something told me to enter her birthday instead. The screen unlocked. And just like that, the walls caved in. The thread with Luke was right there. Open, recent, littered with hearts and photos. There was a selfie of him in a hotel room, shirtless, holding up 2 glasses of wine. Then Kendra, in the same hotel room, in red lingerie I'd never seen before. Smiling, posing. There were messages, dozens of them. Can't stop thinking about you. I hate sneaking around, but it makes everything hotter. I'll pretend I'm at the office again tomorrow. Meet me at the usual place. Each one hit harder than the last. Not just because of what they said, but because of how normal it all seemed. This wasn't a fling. It wasn't some drunken mistake or one-off betrayal. This was a schedule, a system, a second life with a man I hadn't even known existed until a single slip at a family party exposed her. And there he was, Luke, the same guy from the photo, same smug face, same dress shirt, same arm around her waist. I kept scrolling, trying to understand the timeline. The earliest messages were from months ago, way before I started suspecting anything. They joked about hiding things, exchanged inside references I didn't understand, made fun of movies we just watched together, as if I was a third wheel in my own marriage. There was one that stopped me cold. Kendra. He still has no clue. I told him I was working late again. Can't wait to finally have you all to myself. That was the night I brought home Thai food and waited for her on the couch until midnight. The food went cold. I stayed up thinking she was swamped at work, that she'd be tired and grateful when she walked in. Instead, she had walked through the door flushed, glowing, and kissed me on the cheek like I was a pet she remembered to feed. And I let it happen. I believed her. The chat continued well into recent days. There were dates set, locations, little complaints about how he's getting suspicious, and maybe it's time to come clean. But she didn't come clean. She never had any intention to. She was buying time, stalling, making space for the lie to grow legs. I took a **T of everything. Dozens of them. I uploaded them to a private folder in the cloud, double-checked it, then triple-checked it. I wasn't going to make a scene. Not yet. If she saw me snooping, she'd shut it down. Deny. Delete. Rewrite the narrative. I placed the phone back on the nightstand exactly where she'd left it. Screen down, undisturbed. She came out of the bathroom 20 minutes later in a robe, humming. Her skin smelled like jasmine. Her hair was wrapped in a towel. She smiled at me like nothing had changed. "Hey," she said, drying her hands on the towel. "Wanna watch something before bed?" I nodded. "Sure. You pick." She picked a rom-com. She laughed at the right parts. She leaned into me like she always had, like nothing had fractured. And all the while, I sat there with a storm in my chest and the truth burning a hole in my back pocket. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake next to her, listening to the sound of her breathing, thinking about every time she'd touched me after coming home from him, wondering if she ever felt guilty, if she ever thought about me during those hotel stays or if I was just background noise. I thought about confronting her then and there, but I didn't. Because that's not how this story was going to end, not with a screaming match or broken dishes. She'd built this lie slowly, carefully, with precision. and I would dismantle it the same way. That week, I started paying more attention than ever before. On Thursday, she said she had to stay late for a quarterly strategy sync. I nodded, kissed her on the cheek, and watched her drive off. 10 minutes later, I followed. She didn't go to the office. She went to a hotel 15 minutes across town. I stayed parked in the grocery store lot across the street and watched her meet him outside the side entrance. They hugged. He grabbed her hand. They didn't look around. They didn't even try to hide it. By then, I wasn't even surprised. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just took photos from the passenger seat of my car with the same calm she had shown me while lying through her teeth. That night, she came home late and told me about a boring meeting that ran long. She kissed me. She made a joke about her boss being a robot. She climbed into bed and slept soundly. I stared at the ceiling and made a silent vow. I wouldn't let her know what I knew. Not yet. Because this wasn't about catching her anymore. It was about what came next. The thing about knowing the truth is it doesn't just sit quietly in your chest. It shifts. It mutates. It builds. And if you don't act, it starts to devour everything. I could feel it, this growing pressure in my bones, the need to do something, anything, before the lie buried me alive. But I wasn't going to blow up. Not yet. I had to be smarter than her. Smarter than him. In the days after I confirmed the affair, I built a plan, piece by piece. Backups of everything, texts, photos, hotel receipts I'd found in the car, even security cam screensh *TS from a gas station where she'd stopped with Luke. I didn't know why I was collecting so much, but something told me this wasn't just about infidelity. Something felt wrong. Bigger. Like I was standing in the middle of a web and hadn't even realized how tightly I was caught. And then, 3 days later, the knock came. It was around 6 p.m. I'd just gotten home from work. Kendra was still at the office, according to her latest excuse. I was standing in the kitchen, microwaving leftovers, when I saw a car pull into our driveway. Gray sedan. Tinted windows. No plates on the front. 2 men sat inside. The driver stayed put. The passenger stepped out. He was tall. Athletic. Shaved head. Black leather jacket that looked too heavy for spring. I watched him approach the door through the peephole, every alarm bell in my head going off. I didn't open right away. He knocked. Firm, not aggressive, but not casual either. I opened the door halfway, keeping the chain latch in place. Yeah? He gave me a thin smile. The kind people wear when they've already decided something for you. You, Mark. I didn't answer. He looked past me into the house like he was checking for signs of life. I'm just here to pass along a message, he said. From a mutual friend. Who would that be? He shrugged. You don't know me, but you know who I work with. That's when it clicked. The way he said it. The tone. The implication. Luke. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my grip on the door tightened. He smiled again, no teeth this time. Look, man, he said, I get it. You've got questions. Curiosity's natural. But sometimes digging too deep brings more trouble than answers. You know. He took a half step closer. I slammed the door shut. He knocked again. 2 quick taps. Then silence. I waited a full minute before looking through the window. He was gone. The gray sedan was reversing out of the driveway, slow and smooth. Not a scratch of urgency. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding. This wasn't just a warning. It was a message, we know you're watching. I didn't know what Luke did for a living. I didn't know what he was mixed up in, but this wasn't standard your wife is cheating territory anymore. This was something darker. Something coordinated. I called the police that night, not to report a break-in, but just to get a statement logged. The officer who showed up was polite, but didn't seem too concerned. Could have been a scam, he said, sipping gas station coffee on my porch. People are pulling all kinds of in*mitation tricks lately. Scammers don't know your name and drive unmarked sedans, I replied. He jotted down my report but didn't promise anything. Said they'd patrol a little more in the neighborhood. That was it. I didn't sleep that night. I double-locked every door. Left the downstairs lights on. Sat in the living room with my laptop on one side and a baseball bat on the other. Not because I was scared, but because something shifted. I wasn't just dealing with a betrayal anymore. I was dealing with a threat. The next morning, Kendra came home like nothing happened. Walked through the door with her tote bag, Starbucks in hand, humming some pop song like we weren't living in a minefield. You're home early, she said casually. I work here, I replied. Remember? She laughed, but it was forced. Her eyes scanned the room like she was checking for damage. You okay? She asked, putting down her coffee. I stared at her, really looked at her. Her blouse had a tiny lipstick stain on the collar. Not hers. Her nails were freshly done. She looked anew, branded, polished, and I saw it in her eyes. She knew. Not that I knew everything, but that I was close. I didn't answer her. Instead, I said, "Some guy came by yesterday." Her posture didn't change, but her eyes did, just a flicker, but I saw it. "Oh? Who?" Said he was a mutual friend. Sales pitch. Didn't sound like one. More like a warning. Her fingers tightened slightly on the coffee cup. "What did he say?" Said I was asking too many questions. Digging too deep. She blinked. Smiled. Too slow. Too sweet. Probably just some creep trying to sell security systems. People do weird stuff. I nodded. Yeah, weird stuff. She kissed me on the cheek and went upstairs. I stared at the staircase after her, feeling a cold coil tighten in my gut. The next thing I did was install cameras. Not just outside, inside too. Hallway. Living room. My office. Quiet little lenses tucked into corners. She never noticed. Or if she did, she didn't say. I also checked our shared cloud accounts, places she'd forgotten about. OneDrive. Old Gmail logins. That's when I found the backup folder from her old work laptop. Sloppy. Hidden in plain sight. There were PDF files. Scanned forms. A spreadsheet labeled vendor corrections. And then an email. From Luke Mercer. That was the first time I saw his full name. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't romantic. It was corporate. Attached was an Excel file referencing MY Company. My vendor contacts. My quarterly earnings. Some of the figures were wrong, intentionally wrong. The email had been forwarded from Kendra's old address to a personal one. Hers. I opened another PDF. It was an authorization form. Signed by her. My stomach dropped. She'd been helping him skim from my company. They were laundering. Using access she had through bookkeeping to reroute payments to shell vendors with names just similar enough to pass casual inspection. And that's when the picture came together. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about theft, fraud, conspiracy, and the threats. They weren't to scare me into silence. They were a push to make me back off before I uncovered the rest. I took *TS, made copies, sent them to 2 encrypted drives, one at my office, the other to my brother's house out of state. I documented everything. Timeline, names, locations. I was no longer a betrayed husband. I was a target. That night, I sat alone in the garage, thinking about what came next. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but adrenaline. I wasn't going to let them strip me of my dignity and my business. They wanted me to be quiet, to fold, to walk away without asking too many questions. Instead, I was going to drag everything into the light, and I'd start by setting the trap. By this point, I didn't just want answers, I wanted the whole picture. Not just how long Kendra had been lying or how many hotel rooms she and Luke had cycled through. No, I needed to understand the scope, the why behind the betrayal, the mechanics behind the smile. And if the man who showed up at my door was any indication, this wasn't just about lust anymore. This was about leverage. I had already found enough. Texts, photos, an email trail that implicated Kendra in something way beyond marriage ending. But it still felt incomplete, like there was a puzzle box inside another puzzle box. The more I dug, the more I felt I was only scratching the surface of something larger, older, and far more dangerous. That's when I remembered the laptop. Kendra had this old Dell she used for bookkeeping when she freelanced. She stopped using it a while ago, claimed it was too slow, battery barely holding. But she never threw it out. It sat in the hall closet, wedged behind a stack of board games and forgotten tax folders. I don't know why I hadn't checked it sooner. Maybe part of me still clung to the idea that this was a love affair gone wrong, that she'd simply fallen into something emotional, something personal. But after that visit, the veiled threat, the surveillance photos I took of her and Luke, the evidence of financial theft, I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. I pulled out the laptop after she left for her yoga retreat. Another lie, no doubt. It booted up slow, humming like a tired machine on its last legs. But it worked. And to my surprise, it didn't even have a password. The desktop was cluttered with spreadsheets, vendor logs, years of tax folders. But it was the email client that caught my eye, an old Gmail account she must have forgotten to wipe. One message stood out buried in a thread labeled LLC Coordination. From L. Mercer. To Kendra, taylor.bookkeeping@gmail.com. Subject, Transfer Plan, Final Version. The email was just a few lines, but it hit like a bomb. Confirmed with Connor, all 3 payment paths are greenlit. You'll need to process them in separate quarters to avoid flagging. Keep the vendor names as we agreed. Everything gets funneled through the Denver Holding Group first, then we move it out. You're good to sign the docs attached and submit them from your side. I clicked the PDF. It was a contract. Fake vendor agreement. Address listed in Colorado. A shell company. The kind of setup you'd use if you wanted to quietly bleed money from someone without alerting an audit. On the signature line, Kendra Taylor. Clear. Precise. Deliberate. I sat there staring at the screen, heart thudding. Not because it was unexpected, but because of what it confirmed. I'd thought this was personal. About passion. Seduction. A cheap affair wrapped in perfume and excuses. But it wasn't. It was professional. Calculated. Engineered. They were using me, my trust, my company, my marriage as a smokescreen. I opened another folder labeled archive_Q3_clients. Inside were invoices doctored with slightly altered vendor names. I recognized every client except the payment destinations had changed. The bank routing numbers were off by 1 or 2 digits. Barely noticeable. Over the last fiscal year, it added up to over $87,000 redirected to accounts tied to that Denver LLC. And I'd signed off on all of it. Without knowing. Because she'd handled our bookkeeping. Because I'd trusted her. Loved her. My stomach turned. I kept going. There were more emails. More threads between her and Luke. One, dated 2 months ago, read, "Don't worry about Mark. He's slow to catch on. If anything, he'll go after you personally and never see the rest of it. We'll be long gone by the time it matters." Long gone. They were planning to disappear. With my money. With my future. With my life. I copied everything, every email, invoice, signature, and contract. Uploaded it all to the encrypted drives I'd created. Then I printed the entire paper trail. I didn't trust the cloud anymore. I needed hard proof. I wasn't sure if this was a prosecutable crime yet, but it was damn sure a betrayal of the kind that deserved justice. That evening, I sat on the edge of the bed with the printed file in my hands. Kendra walked in around 9 p.m. looking radiant and relaxed, hair tied back, gym bag slung over one shoulder. "Hey," she said, dropping the bag near the closet. "You okay? You look kind of tense." I looked up at her slowly. "We need to talk." She froze. Just for a second. Then her expression softened into something vaguely performative, concern, maybe. "Sure," she said. "What's on your mind?" I held up the folder. She blinked. "What's that?" "You tell me." She walked closer, eyes narrowing. "Mark, what is this?" I said nothing. Just handed it to her. She opened the folder and started scanning the first few pages. By the 3rd, her breath caught. By the 6th, her hands were shaking. This isn't, these are." Her voice cracked. "These are emails from you," I said coldly. "And those are your signatures. The vendors, the transfers, this is what you've been doing while telling me you're working late or finding yourself on yoga mats." I didn't mean, she started, then stopped. I let the silence stretch. She sat down, folder in her lap, defeated. For the first time since this entire thing started, she looked small. Not mysterious. Not powerful. Just small. "You could have told me," I said. "About the affair. About being unhappy. About anything. But you didn't. You took everything I gave you and you flipped it. You turned our life into a scam." She said nothing. I walked toward the bedroom door. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Is Luke working alone? Is there more?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's not just Luke." I stopped. "There are others?" She didn't answer. But that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't some little 2-person hustle. This was something bigger. Maybe something organized. Which meant I needed help. Real help. That night I made 2 calls. First, to my attorney, laid out everything. Told him to prepare for a fraud case and likely a restraining order. Second, to an investigator. A real one. Someone I trusted from years back who worked quietly and efficiently. By morning, we had a plan. Surveillance, tracebacks, formal documentation. No more hoping she'd confess. No more trying to catch glimpses through the cracks. I was going to tear this whole thing down properly, legally, surgically. And if Kendra thought she could still slip away quietly, she was in for a surprise. Because now? Now, I wasn't angry. I was focused. A few days later, Kendra reached out again, this time with a strange proposition. Let's talk, she said. Somewhere private. She suggested the country house, our little retreat property we hadn't visited in months. Something about it set off alarms. She called it neutral ground, but all I heard was isolated. I agreed anyway. What she didn't know was that I had already looped in the police. With everything I'd uncovered, fraud, forged documents, and the veiled threats, they were more than interested. I gave them the address and a window of time, just in case. When I pulled up to the driveway, Luke was already there, leaning against his car, arms crossed like he owned the place. Kendra stood beside him, looking uneasy, like she hadn't expected me to actually show. Luke smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We can make this easy, Mark. Walk away. Drop the accusations. You'll be fine. You mean, I said, you won't ruin my life any further? Kendra spoke up. You don't want this to get ugly. Just let it go. That's when I heard the sirens. Police cruisers rolled up the gravel path like ghosts out of fog. Luke stepped back. Kendra went pale. I looked at both of them and said, too late. They were detained on the spot, questions flying, cuffs clicking. I didn't say another word. I just watched. The investigation that followed unraveled the whole thing. Kendra and Luke weren't just having an affair. They were part of a larger fraud ring targeting small businesses. She'd been the inside access point. Luke, the handler. And those mutual friends who came to my house? Not amateurs. They were charged with fraud, conspiracy, and **medation. Kendra tried to spin it, said she was manipulated, that she didn't know the full extent. But the emails, the signatures, the surveillance, they crushed any defense she had left. I sold the country house, filed for divorce, rebuilt my business from the ashes, this time with real oversight and tighter controls. The silence afterward was hard. So was unlearning how to miss someone who no longer existed. But over time, I felt something unfamiliar. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the start of something real. In the end, I realized something simple and devastating. When the person who's supposed to protect your heart decides to break it instead, your job isn't to pick up the pieces for them. It's to rebuild without them. And I did.